the way I saw those things was very different from my peers, was pivotal, because it meant that, being comfortable with your outlook being different and unique, but also realizing that was a gift and a talent. And so when I look over my 25-year career in IT, I've held roles such as vice president and senior vice president of technology risk and compliance for SunTrust Bank. And with a bit of intentionality, I had the opportunity to seek out specific opportunities that would allow me to focus on the things that I enjoyed: strategy, solving very complex problems. And that focus and that realization of what my gift and what my talent was would allow me to take on roles such as the Chief Information Officer for Fulton County Government and play a pivotal role in helping them be a Super Bowl host a few years ago. It would allow me to take on the role that I did today with Microsoft and what it means to build out a new engineering hub for a global company like Microsoft. And so I think when I look at those defining moments, it was accepting who I am, how I saw this space that I was trying to figure out what's my voice and where do I play, and then embracing that gift and that talent of being able to see technology strategy and risk differently, and being a thought leader now today and being able to advise corporate boards on how technology strategy can either help an organization succeed or erode their progress to digital transformation.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. So inspiring to hear that, all of the wealth of experience that you shared. Anyone else want to jump in and share more about their stories?
Sure. I'll jump in there. So again, Tyron Fitzgerald. I have over 25 years of leadership experiences in information technology. However, my career started in the U.S. Navy as a young high school graduate, where I was excelling very fast just due to the academic accomplishments, where it put me in charge of very senior people or people that were older than me at such a young age. And it gave me an opportunity to start developing my leadership skills there. However, I've had a number of different assignments from business relationship manager to SAP security technical manager to call center leader, all different type of experiences that have helped me hone in on my leadership skills. And I think that has given me the breadth of experiences that the leadership teams are looking for as they start to look for people for key C-suite roles. They're looking for diversity set of experiences across a variety of business operations sections that I think sets you in place to be able to talk to leaders across the different areas. So in these C-suite roles, what you're looking for is ability to collaborate and connect with business leaders, whether it be in finance, legal, HR, or whatever the case may be. They're looking for someone to be able to connect and bring solutions to help them accomplish their business goals and objectives. So, all of those things lead to being able to execute and deliver to help with a lot of different experiences as far as industry, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, you name it. I've probably experienced that level of working with different leaders. I have a master's degree in engineering, a bachelor's degree in business administration, and an associate's degree in information technology. My first role was a network administrator at World, but you guys bought us. We were NBC Bank, and you guys bought us. We may not have crossed paths, but I was a network administrator at that time. So that's it for me, Gina.
All right, Tyrone, thank you. It was so great to be able to hear the breadth of experiences that are expected. That's a key takeaway, as well as I heard from you, Nicole, the strategy, having that strategic thinking is key. Anyone else want to jump in and share more about their background and their experience? Ivory, you look like you wanted to jump in before.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and thank you again for the question. So just like Nicole, I'm also a professor, a full-time professor at Howard University, and I actually consider that to be my anchor position. That's the position that I've had throughout my career, being a professor. And during my academic career, I was grooming myself for either academia or being a psychologist. But I never really thought about myself as a C-suite executive. In fact, probably the first time I thought about myself as a C-suite executive is when you all invited me to this panel. So even being the CEO, since it's a small nonprofit, my identity isn't necessarily a C-suite executive. But I I entered the field of psychology because of mentorship and experiences I had in undergraduate. And I went through and got an undergraduate, a master's, and a PhD in psychology. I did my first psychology position was at the United States Penitentiary. I was a pre-doctoral intern there. And that was my last experience before graduating with a PhD in psychology. So at that point, I was trying to decide whether I would stay with the federal prison system and become a prison psychologist, a full-time permanent prison psychologist, or go into academia, or go into the clinical environment. And so I ended up deciding the academia and the clinical environment by taking a assistant professor position at Southern University, along with being the clinical director of a group home. So I did that for 3.5 years. And then I was recruited to Howard University after I got a major grant from the United States Department of Justice to study police psychology. So I ended up at Howard University as an assistant professor. And in my second year, I took an opportunity at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation to be a researcher. There was a summer research position that ended up being built out into a 6-year position. So for 6 years, I was a professor at Howard and senior research analyst for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I think it was around the time when I was at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation that I learned to be outside the academic bubble. And I started to learn how to communicate and talk in a way that people outside of academia would be able to access my work. And I realized there was a real disconnect between what we were doing in academia, and I'm sure Nicole could relate. Some of the things that the ways in which we speak in the ivory tower, and we're talking about important issues, but we're not talking about it in such a way, and we're not positioning it in a way where the people that we're talking about could really benefit from it. So I'm doing research on looking at how to keep people, keep Black men out of the criminal justice system, but I'm packaging them in latent growth curve models and all this esoteric language when people really need to access the information that's actually working with young Black men. So the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation helped me a lot in terms of taking my research and translating it in such a way that it could help people. After 6 years and being able to work with various members of Congress, and then President Obama, he ran for his first term. Around my 3rd year of being with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, I started to make the kind of connections that I needed to go into the Obama administration. So I spent 3 years as a deputy director and then the executive director of the White House Initiative on HBCUs. I took a leave of absence from Howard to do that. At the end of President Obama's term in 2016, I had a political position, so my position ended at that time. That's when I took on the role of president and CEO of the QEM network, which is a small organization that I benefited from as an assistant professor. And I just remembered everything that QEM did for me as an assistant professor by helping me to build up the skills that I needed to be competitive in the research space. And I wanted to do the same for others. And I knew that being with the Obama administration and learning about all of the different opportunities in the federal government, it gave me a lot to bring to the organization. So that's how I ended up in the position I'm in right now.
Awesome. I just heard so much within that, all of the great work that you've done with the Congressional Black Congress and so forth. So Thank you so much for sharing that. And Cattell, we definitely want to give you a chance to be able to speak to your journey and to the role that you are in.
Happy to do that. And my journey is certainly quite different. So when I look back and try to look at what were the defining moments that led to me to this seat right now, they're quite different, I think, than I've heard from everyone. I'll start with the first defining moment was really as a summer student, a teenager, a high schooler in a summer engineering apprenticeship program, where I met mentors that would change my life. And I really spent every summer, every Christmas, every spring break from that moment through college, being a girl that got IT, learning to be confident in my technical skills, learning to be confident being the only girl in the room. That was the first defining moment of my career. When I started my professional career as a software engineer, I literally worked in every area of the software development lifecycle and thought that the technical side of software design is what I wanted to do for life. And I've done that. I did that for the government and several other companies. And I was doing just that for EY, one of Deloitte's big competitors. I was designing an electronic management, document management system for the national tax practice. And somehow that effort was extremely complicated. That I ended up on the project gone wrong. And we just had lots of changes, lots of churn in project leadership, just lots of challenges. And I found myself filling in all over that program just to keep things moving. The skills that I had wherever I could lend them, I just did that. I mean, at the cusp of yet another leadership change, my leader came to me and asked if I would be the interim program lead while they searched for a really senior experienced person to come in and really drive the program because we'd had so many changes. I said yes to that interim role, happy to do whatever the firm needed me to do. After a few months, they identified a permanent leader. However, the business sponsor, the partner that really owned the program, decided she didn't want the new person. She gave me a call and said, "Hey, Cattell, have you ever thought of working outside of your technology expertise and program leadership?" Hadn't even crossed my mind. I said, "No, hadn't thought of it." And she said, I think you have some skills that you haven't tapped into. And, I'd like you to stay as the lead of the program. If you would do that, I'm going to call our technology leadership and tell them that." And I'm like, "Okay, if you think I can do it, then maybe I can." She then calls my leader in technology, who then calls me. And of course, it was all his idea. "Cattell, I really think you have a set of skills that haven't been tapped. And you've done an excellent job on this program. It's been in better shape than it has in the past 3 years. And we really want to invest in you and you take this role." And of course, he never told me that he talked to her. I never told him that she had called me in advance. But that change, that shift from being just a technical leader to an overall program leader really changed the trajectory of my career. And while I didn't know it back then, that was true sponsorship in action. And that's why I'm in the C-suite seat that I'm in now. It really is all about sponsorship.
Awesome. I love that. And so much to take away from that response. We have to lean in and to accept opportunities that perhaps we may not feel necessarily ready for. And that's key. And then the sponsorship is key. Loving what we're able to get from you as panelists. Thank you so much. So let's jump into some of the questions that we have received. So there is a question: do you think it is necessary, or do you recommend receiving an MBA to prepare for a role in the C-suite?
I'll chime in. I don't know that it's necessary, but I do have an MBA from Auburn University. Any Auburn grads out there, War Eagle. It really helped me because I had a solid technical background. It's completely technical upbringing from literally from high school through college. I'd only had computer science and engineering background. Didn't really know how to run a business. Wasn't really important in the whole grand scheme of what I thought my life journey would be. But I really appreciated going through an MBA program, and not even an executive MBA. I went through a full-blown MBA program that gave me the ins and outs of running a business that I hadn't even thought about, that truly applied, whether you're in a career in technology or whatever the business is. So I would say, while it's not mandatory, it certainly is helpful.
Yeah, I'll say this, it depends on your competition, right? So there are a lot of competitors for these roles. And many of those competitors bring a lot of different skills, education, experiences, relationships. And I think Katua mentioned that, but relationships is one of the most powerful tools you can have in your arsenal as you compete for these roles. But if I would say that if that's the culture and the pedigree that they're looking for the role that you're pursuing, absolutely, it can give you the competitive advantage, or it can take away the opportunity for them to exclude you from the role. But I would always say there's never enough that you can say is not beneficial in your tool belt, especially as you compete for these opportunities, because many people are bringing MBAs, they're bringing certifications, they're bringing a holistic set of tools in their tool belt that you will be competing against.
And you know, I'll second the comments of my fellow panelists and just maybe add a thought or two. I don't have an MBA, but I do have an executive master's in MIS and Management Information Systems from Georgia State University. And my perspective on it is this: it really, like anything else, depends on what you want to get out of it. And so I always encourage people that when you look at this next opportunity, not only what sort of education and what sort of learning do I want to take away from this, but more importantly, are there skills that I can build, the networking skills, the communication skills? How do I communicate with people outside of my organization? How do I communicate with those that would be outside of my own personal network? And then, so I'm really speaking to the ability to leverage the educational setting. It's an infinity group that's going to provide you, or should be able to provide you, the networking contacts that Tyron mentioned. And then some of those connections are certainly much longer than the extent of the program that you're involved in. For me, achieving that master's level credential, it opened doors. It removed some of those rejects where there was an education requirement that, even though I had industry experience, years of industry experience and certifications, that credential removed some of those barriers where I could now be considered for opportunities that I simply wasn't considered for before. And more important to me was the opportunity to bring key relationships forward that I still have today from that setting and from that environment. And so I look at it as an opportunity to gain skills, to gain a leadership perspective, to demonstrate that you can follow through outside of your own work context and exposure to new things, new ideas, and new ways of thinking about problems.
Love that. Thank you all for joining in. I heard a few things. I heard make sure that it is oriented to your goals. I also heard that you need to pay attention to the competition or the market and what it's asking for, and think about ways that you can continue to set yourself apart. And also just in general, thinking about ways to refine your experience such that you can continue to qualify for these executive level roles. So awesome. Thank you so much for weighing in on that. We have another question along those same lines, asking how would you advise young leaders to build their experience and to grow their leadership skills? Ivory, we haven't heard from you in a while. Would you like to join and share your response on this one?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I would offer as advice. So you should always find ways to position yourself as a leader, no matter what you're doing. So, throughout my journey, I've always had a job, even when I was too young to have a job. I had probably illegally had jobs, but I've done things like roofing. And this is when I was a teenager. I picked tomatoes on Johns Island. I cleaned my mother's daycare center when I was in middle school. That was probably my first, regular wage job. So I've always had jobs, but in every opportunity there was, or every job, there was some opportunity for leadership. And I think, whatever you do, I've also worked fast food and things like that. In any situation, you'll see people who are standing out and who are going above and beyond. And it's not just about working harder, it's about being smart and understanding the environment that you're in. And with that, I'll get to some specific points. So the first point I want to make is that you always work for organizations and institutions, not people. So we have this, in most settings, you have a boss. And so that becomes a little deceptive because you start to think of yourself as working for a boss. You're working for a person. But actually, those people could change. You're actually working for the organization. And so what you are doing, even if you are doing it under the direction of a boss, you should always reconcile in your mind what the mission of that organization is and understand what you're doing is to further the mission of the organization, not the agenda of a person. And so when you are focused on the organization and representing the organization, then your leadership starts to naturally emerge because you start to question certain things, you start to contribute certain things, you start to think about how to do things a little bit differently, because it's not just about what somebody told you to do, it's about your understanding of the mission of that organization. The other thing I would say, and this will be the final thing, is there are two fundamental things you can offer any organization or institution you work for. One is your labor, the other is your ideas. Your labor is something that can always be replaced. Your labor is something that you will never take with you, it will remain there. And your labor, when that's all you're about, you tend to get pigeonholed in that position because that becomes the most important thing you are contributing, that labor that you are bringing. Now, your ideas is a different thing. Your ideas are things that will always be with you. So if you leave, those ideas come with you. Your ideas are things that are irreplaceable. So it's not a plug and play type situation. If you're generating ideas for the company, you are indispensable. So you always want to, and a lot of times you get hired for your labor, but you want to try to position yourself. You want to try to phase in your role as being more of an ideas person than a labor person, and to peel back on labor and increase ideas and solidify yourself as the type of leader that is generating ideas for an organization.
So thank you for that response, Ivory, so much for us to take away. And I hope the attendees truly are leaning in and taking away these pearls that are being dropped from our esteemed group of panelists. We have another question, and the question is, along your journey to the C-suite, what was your biggest personal challenge to overcome to reach your current position? Keto, why don't we start with you?
Okay, happy to take that one. For me, I think I had the biggest challenge, I believe, is I truly believed if I worked hard, and simply by working hard, that I could meet my career aspirations. That's all it took. You couldn't outwork me. I'm going to put in the hours. I'm going to deliver. I don't care what it takes to deliver the project. I'm all in. You can't outwork me. And that's really what was going to help me meet my career aspirations. I didn't always invest time into networking or building a network. Didn't see the importance of that. Really didn't understand the difference in mentorship and sponsorship. You know, I was like many women are, especially women in technology, collect mentors like I did shoes, and really found myself over mentored and under sponsored. So for me, my two fundamental challenges were the shift in mindset around understanding the importance of, yes, doing the work is important. You got to do that. That is, you know, table stakes. But the importance of building a network, and then the fundamental understanding and the difference in mentorship and sponsorship, I think, were the two big things that I had to challenges with, that I had to learn and change my perspective on in order to end in the seat that I'm in now.
So relatable. I think a lot of us could definitely relate to that, working really hard and thinking that that's going to cause something to transform for you, but it's definitely also attributed to sponsorship as well. Tyrone, would you like to weigh in here?
No, I think Ketua said it best. One of the things that we bring from just our heritage is we come to work to do work. We don't come to work to connect and build relationships. And when we're invited out to these lunches and dinners and things of that nature, we pass on that because we're focused on going home and spending time with our family. And I think Katua is right. If you want to grow and advance in your career, then you got to give people some insights into who you are. People, they promote people that they like, they promote people that they connect with, and they promote people that they have a commonality with, right? So I didn't share this earlier in my story, but a lot of my success is contributed to those relationships. And in our field, in IT, we don't have a lot of people that look like us in those powerful positions. So you got to have a sponsor, not someone that's just gonna, mentor you, but someone that's gonna sponsor you and gonna give you the visibility and opportunity to demonstrate that you bring to the table those core set of skills, competencies, and abilities to deliver, because that person can promote you only so high. It requires a lot of other people sitting at those tables to promote you beyond where he or she can promote you to. And one of the other things I had a hard time with, in trying to move up the ladder, not that I was requesting to move up the ladder, I was always picked to move up the ladder, but telling your story. A lot of what we bring to the table is we accomplish one thing, and as soon as we accomplish that, we look for the next project, look for the next area that we can probably go and get a success story and things of that nature. But I had a sponsor once that said, Tyron, you've probably accomplished more in this year than most people have accomplished in their 20-year career, but they're telling their story. So I'm going to work with you on how to tell your story and how much value you add, and keep a consistent message of that success story where people can see it as visual, and then they will invite you to the table for projects and different things, versus you seeking out those initiatives and those efforts, which really probably don't surface up to the level of what they're looking for anyway. So I would say build your relationships and continuously tell your success story. And your story may not reverberate at the levels that they need to. So you need your sponsor to share those success stories and tell what great person you are and the value you add to the organization. So there are multiple communications channels, and you got to maximize the use of all of those channels.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree further. You definitely have to maximize the use of every channel that you have. So well said. We have another question that came in with regards to how do we keep the next generation motivated to remain in these STEM fields? Children and the young people are often challenged with outside forces that generally take them away from their involvement in STEM. And so, Nicole, given your background in academia, I think it would be great if we could start with you to answer this question.
Absolutely happy to address that question. There's so much that comes to mind when we start looking at, what are the challenges and how do we put forward those things, not only to interest younger students, but as you mentioned, keep them engaged. First and foremost, I'll start with a call to action for all of us, regardless of where you are in your career journey, whether you're that high school student, you're entering into the college setting or the higher ed setting, you're new or earlier on in your career, even those of us that are later in our career, there's really a call to action. And that's realizing that everyone has something to give and something to offer, that we need more of us being those advocates and sharing our stories with those that typically don't have the level of exposure, those underrepresented groups into STEM and technology. And whether that's participating at camps, at schools, whether that's doing an ice cream social, whether that's just having a conversation with a few kids on the block, or whether it's taking something that you do for enjoyment and figuring out how do you extend that conversation and bring your personal pursuits together with a commitment to really give back and drive. I think that's so important. When I look back on my own career, in my household, in my community, I can honestly tell you, we never had the conversation regarding even going to college for purpose. You were going to college because it was something that you needed to do to increase your skills. But I never had those conversations around being an IT executive, being an IT leader. Certainly never thought about being a professor and teaching in higher ed and creating new programs in the university setting. But we need that. We need folks like us that, regardless of where you are in your career, to have conversations and building those communities. We know that there's a concept called social mobility. And the more we can expose the younger folks to these other opportunities, the broader their social networks are. And that's so key, and that's so important to allow them to see technology in a different way. The second thing that I'll talk about, we're all here today sharing our journeys, but we're doing it with stories. I'll tell you this, even when I entered into IT as a technology executive and a woman, and part of that may have been because, like so many other women in technology, I was one of, all right, or the only woman in that setting. But there's times that technology had this reputation of not being very welcoming to people that were different and not being very welcoming to women. I think we have to be able to share that story of what technology offers in a way that's appealing. So part of it's changing the language. And Ivory, you mentioned this early on in your introduction. Sometimes, when we're in a field, we don't do a great job of that. We use all of these acronyms and the nomenclature that comes along with the field, but it's around being intentional and meeting people where they're at and gaining that level of exposure. And then all of us finding that voice to be a mentor, to mentor somebody. All of us have the ability to give back something to that next generation. And as we go through, looking to find, where does your passion meet your purpose, right? And having conversations around legacy building. I think there's a big call to action for many of us to continue to drive that conversation. Over time, there's things that certainly the industry needs to do to address industry level challenges, and we'll talk more about that. But I do think with the personal commitment, the call for more access to programming, working with universities, going to local school systems, and then being a part of those communities, I think if we do those simple things, we can begin to change the outlook on technology and what it can mean for that next generation of technology leaders.
Absolutely love it. Thank you so much. I heard exposure a number of times, and that is key. And that's why it is so great that we all have the ability to be exposed to you as leaders. So Ivory, you have a background in academia. Would you like to touch on this question?
Yeah, and Nicole did an excellent job of talking about the things that we all need to do for our children in order to put them in position to have that access and interest. So I won't restate any of that. I want to talk more about some of these systemic barriers because there are some things that are really concerning about our education system that makes even our best efforts to create the kind of interest and motivation for STEM, it could make those efforts fall flat just because of things that are not around, or things that people are doing that they shouldn't be doing. So I want to give some examples of that. So when we look at high schools that have the highest proportion of Black and Hispanic students, more than half of them do not have 4 units of math and science that students are able to take. So that means that these are schools where, often public schools, where you take your Algebra 1, you take geometry, you take Algebra 2, and you have nothing else to take after that. And if you do have something to take after that, it's like a business math or something like that. And the same with science. A lot of these schools do not have physics. So you could be the best and brightest student. And I went to a school like that. The high school that I graduated from, I was only able to get trigonometry and physics because there was an activist teacher there who said that we needed that. It was because of that teacher, his fight to get physics in that school. That's how I was able to take physics. And that's how I was able to go to the university I ended up going to, which is Louisiana State University. Had it not been for Mr. Jacobs, I would not have been able to go to that state university. So it was this misalignment between what the state was requiring for their most competitive state university and what many public school students even had to offer in their school, or could take in their school. So this is something, in my opinion, should be illegal for your tax dollars to support two entities that don't connect. So we have this type of thing that happened. Now at the higher education level, I think there's a lot we can learn from HBCUs, because when we look at the schools that have the largest number of Black students who go on to graduate, undergraduate, and go on to get their PhDs in STEM, when we look at the top 50, 22 of them are HBCUs. And the entire top 10 are HBCUs, or is HBCUs. So HBCUs are doing something right. But I think when we look at some of those predominantly white institutions that aren't doing so well, you can really look at some of their practices. Many of them have weed out courses. So you have popular majors like engineering, and you have Black students that will enroll in engineering. And in an effort to right size the number of students, try to push some students out of engineering into other fields, they'll set up classes that are really just designed to weed out some students who they think they can't cut it. Now, the problem with that is that, one, the weed out courses typically have little or no relation to your ability to actually do well in the field. A lot of times it's these abstract notions, not even foundational things that you need to have. It's things that is just really meant to be hard. And then another problem with it is that it ends up being more of a barrier on poor students, because sometimes students can get through the weed out course, but they're only getting out with a D or a C, and then that may compromise their financial aid. Now, if you come from a rich family, it doesn't matter because your family's kicking that in, so you can just make that up on the back end. So these are some of the things that we need to evaluate and scrutinize, because even our best efforts, if there's policies in place and practices in place that is creating these unnecessary barriers to entry into STEM fields, then we're going to continue to have these gaps in our ability to enter into these fields.
Awesome. Thank you, Ivory, for that. And thank you for touching on some of the systemic issues that could potentially be barriers, and at times are barriers in the K through 20 education system. I appreciate that. We have a question for you, Tyrone. The question is, you mentioned being a leader to people who were in many situations much older than you. How did you handle being the new kid on the block, but as you kept control of your leadership status?
Well, I think first and foremost, we're all leaders, right? And I just think that sometimes we push that definition beyond what it really should be. But we're all leaders in your personal lives as well as your professional lives. But you just got to come into where your leadership strengths lay. As a youngster going into the military and of those older gentlemen, I was on a ship. I was on a USS Peterson, and one of the things that I think people have to understand is that people respect folks that respect them, right? And making sure you understand what it is that person wants to get out of the relationship versus what you're trying to get out of the relationship, and establishing a common ground that here's the task that we're trying to accomplish. What do you have to offer and recommend as we try to accomplish this goal? So here's what my expectations are. Tell me a little bit about how you can contribute to the success of accomplishing those goals and objectives, and how can you contribute? tell me where your strengths, your weaknesses, and things of that nature are. And then we build a strategy together to accomplish the common goal. So, although I was a lot younger, I think giving everyone an opportunity to contribute to how we're going to accomplish the goal, talk about some of the things that were strengths and weaknesses for them, and distribute the areas across all of the different team members, I think address the concern as far as my age, because the maturity in the assignments was what they were really focused on, and bringing a team together to accomplish the goal kind of relinquished any of those concerns as it related to my age. They respected the fact that I brought the team together and put forth the efforts of the entire team versus me just being, and I think Ivy touched on this earlier. I never want anyone to say I'm the boss, because I think bring forth a different perspective versus I'm a good leader. So I want people to follow my leadership skills because of the vision, because of the common goals, and how I treat people in the team and give them opportunity to contribute. So I have in industry, I work with ex-military people, and the first thing they call me is boss. Hey, what do you want me to do, boss? And I pull I pull the table back from them and say, guys, what do you want to do? And what are your recommendations to success? And I try to teach them a commonality of, don't always come to me for the answer, come to me for the solution. And I can support that vision, or I can give you career leadership advice for how I have been able to deliver and accomplish things. So I tell my people all the time, guys, don't come to me with a problem unless you have a solution, right? And if they come to me without a problem, I send them with homework to come back to me with a proposal. And typically I want 3 options. I want in a recommendation. Give me your 3 options, give me a recommendation. Of course, I have thoughts in mind of what I want to do, but the most effective way to lead a team is to empower your people. Did that answer your question, Gina? Or whoever
Yes.
answered that question? Okay.
Yes, I believe it did. And thank you for giving both sides. You gave both the perspective of, as an executive leader, what are the things that you can do? And also on the other side, a person presenting to an executive leader, what they need to bring to the table. So thank you for that. We've heard from a number of you about the different experiences that you've had, the exposure that you've had, as well as the formal or informal education that you've had to be able to prepare for the roles that you have today. One of the specific areas that we heard was about sponsorship and mentorship and the difference between the two. So we have a question from Donna Bowman. How do you know the difference between a sponsor and a mentor?
I'll take that because I think I'm probably an advocate now that I've learned a lesson. Mentors can give you great advice. They've worked in the career area that you're in. They can give you tips and tools and advice along your career. But a sponsor can make things happen for you. A sponsor is in a position that can influence your next role. They can pound the table for you. They can speak about you in rooms that you aren't in, that literally transform your career, that literally get you the next role. And it took me a long while to figure out that difference. You think I'm getting all this mentoring, these people are giving me all this great advice that I'm going to put into practice, and that's going to get me to the next role. But really, you have to have someone in your organization that's advocating for you. That's what a sponsor is. And not that you can ask people to be your mentor, but you don't go up and ask somebody to be your sponsor. I think sponsorship type relationships happen organically. While they come out of building your network, they come out of that exercise. It really is by having experiences, being exposed to people that see your work ethic, that understand your career aspirations and lend you their credibility and are willing to actually pound the table for you within their organization to get you the next role. So the difference in a mentor can give you great tips and tools. A sponsor can get you the next job.
And I think you're so spot on there. And if I could, Gina, just add one bit of one bit of guidance for those, Kato's spot on with how do you find a sponsor? A sponsor really identifies you, your capability, and has strategic insight to the organization. And spot on, I couldn't agree with her more in terms of the value that that sponsor brings. I want to add just one thing though, when we talk about mentors, mentors can be inside your organization and outside your organization. Unlike a sponsor. And I would encourage people to seek mentorship inside the organization and outside the organization as you're figuring out your career journey. I think there's benefit to having both. And the one thing that I learned later in my career that I felt maybe would have changed some of the mentors I aligned myself with during my career is that when you're seeking a mentor, think about it as a conversation for a two-way relationship. Sometimes we're told that we need mentors and somebody will volunteer to be your mentor and you're excited to get that mentor and you just kind of go along with it. But there's an important conversation around fit, around ideas and how that mentor is going to interact with you. So don't be afraid that when you're having a conversation with a mentor, to have that conversation for fit. Is this a person you want to share your personal journey with? Do you align from a personality perspective? What's their outlook on you and the industry? And I think that that's an important position to hold when you're identifying a mentor, that it really should be a two-way conversation, not just the mentor feeling you out as a mentee, but as a mentee, you should have a voice in that conversation to say, is this going to be the right mentor for me?
Hey, Gina, I don't want to continue to extend because I think Ms. James and Nicole shared, a lot, right? And I think all those points are absolutely spot on. I simply say a mentor is someone that talks to you and a sponsor is someone that talks about you. But I've made this mistake. I'm not sure the other panelists have, but as you are choosing a sponsor, do you really know if that sponsor has will take the boldness to actually sponsor you when they're given the opportunity? They may be a VP, they may be a executive vice president or whatever the case may be, and you see them as someone with power. But what I've experienced that as we start to choose our sponsors, they don't execute their power. So I think when we start to look at sponsorship, we got to look beyond people that look like us. We got to look beyond those folks that actually sit at the table, but they don't use their power influence at the table. So I think what has benefited me a lot after I've learned that just because a person looks like me don't mean they would execute those powers, that I've had to get sponsorship from people that don't necessarily look like me. That's all I wanted to add there.
Yeah, just a couple of things to add. One, don't get caught up on titles and status when you're looking for a mentor. You may find an administrative assistant that's been at the company for 20 years, and that may be the best mentor that you can have. They might be able to tell you things and give you guidance that no one else can. So don't get hung up on that. The second thing I would say is, and I'll just use myself as an example because I think everybody navigates relationships differently, right? I've never really connected with the term mentorship. What I have are role models and friends, all right? Because really, you don't really choose your mentor, they choose you. And so, sometimes we try to, position ourselves to get mentored by somebody. And, sometimes you could end up in a lot of heartache that way. But anybody can be your role model. Like I can, see somebody and study them and, look at what they're doing and, go to things where they're speaking at and, connect with them, in certain ways, but I don't necessarily need them to mentor me. Some of them, if I don't really feel like I connect with them personally, like I don't think I could be necessarily a friend to them, but they're doing things that I admire, then the role model is good enough. I just want to watch them work and contribute where possible. But then there are others they become friends. You know, like the executive director before me of the White House Institute on HBCUs, he was my role model first, and then he became my friend. And some people would call that a mentor, but for me, is mostly friendship. So I think more about the uniqueness of each relationship, not necessarily this person is my mentor or this person is my sponsor.
Awesome. So much to take away from what everyone said. And you all, as an audience, did a great job asking that question, because our panelists are passionate about that topic. And so they all weighed in. So thank you so much for that. We have time for about 2 more questions. So we're going to take this next question. If you could change one thing about your journey up to where you sit now, what would that be?
I guess I'll take that one since we've gone to silence. For me personally, probably would have relaxed a little bit. I was quite intense um, as far as just focused on the work. I would have learned the lesson about networking, I think, a lot earlier in my career, and spent more time in networking and accepting those invitations to dinner than the one working the long hours on call, solving issues, till, the wee hours of the morning. I would have put more value in developing and building an actionable network earlier in my career. I think it's probably the one thing that I would change.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I would ask more questions, right? So, I started to build my own plan, my own career expectations, and started to taking classes and getting certified in this and doing a whole lot of things. But I never sat down and asked the question is, what does success look like? And people can tell you very clearly that are making decisions what success look like, because I think a lot of times we think, oh man, if I get my certification, if I do this, and like Katia said, work very hard, accomplish this, and meet the project deliverables on time, then my next role would naturally manifest itself. But what I've learned is that those are things they expect. That's not something different than what they hired you to do, right? So what's the differentiator? What's going to set you apart from your peers? And what is it that's going to lay the foundation to say, Tyron is a team player. He really gets all culture. He understands what the keys for success are. And these are the type of things they're really looking for. But when we say, hey, man, I'm so smart. Well, the company hires smart people all over the place. They hire dumb people, or it's not their intentions to hire dumb people. So your smartness doesn't really get there. I've seen people come to the organizations that are extremely smart, but they never work out. So I think it's more about, as many of us have said on this panel a number of times, it's about your teamwork, your collaboration, your ability to influence change, how you working, and everybody wants to work with people that they like.
And I'll jump in and add to it. I totally agree. I won't speak any more about the value of networking early on. That was certainly an opportunity for me in my career. But as I reflect back, the other opportunity that I really see is having the grit and the gravitas to create opportunities for yourself. Sometimes I think, particularly when we're earlier on in our career, or we're not sure where we sit within the context of an organization, we can be a little bit timid or trepid in our approach to identifying those opportunities where we see a problem, we see an opportunity in the organization, and vocalizing that. And so if that's one thing that I would do differently in my career, it would be exploring those conversations around opportunity creation earlier. I learned that lesson later on in my career, and it's been rewarding. And so being comfortable having the conversation around opportunities that you see in an organization and how you can contribute to that. I'd say be willing to identify those opportunities and have those conversations even early in your career.
Awesome, amazing. You all have the audience is just going crazy with what they're putting in the chat window. So thank you so much. We're gonna go ahead and close with this last question. And so it's to all of you as panelists, because you bring such a wealth of experience, and I think everyone here can agree that we are really full with what it is that you're sharing with us. And definitely we're gonna play this back and listen intently and make sure that we establish an action plan for ourselves in terms of aspiring to get to where you are. So the question that we have is, for those that are aspiring to that C-suite or executive leadership, what is the one piece of advice? And I know you've touched on so many, but what is the one piece of advice that you would give that individual?
I'll start with that. One piece of advice for me is be your authentic self. When I look at leaders that I admire most, and without putting a specific name or a title out there, when I see leadership that's authentic and that's genuine, it might not always be right and it might not always be perfect, but that ability to be your authentic self, being genuine, goes so far in building, when we talk about building relationships and being trusted. When people bring you their problems or bring you problems to solve, that are outside your line of responsibility, to me, that's a sign and signal of trust. When people are consulting with you around things, whether it's organizationally, the opportunities that they see, that's a sign of trust. And I would say, bring your authentic self, be genuine, be empathetic in your conversations and how you build relationships, even in a professional setting.
Those are all great. I think the one thing I would say is, piece of advice is be worthy of sponsorship. No, nobody gets to this seat by themselves. You can't work hard enough. If I could have worked hard enough to become COO of Deloitte Technology, I would have been COO long ago, because I worked hard. But you have to be worthy of sponsorship. When I say worthy of sponsorship, I mean, be a person of your word. Whatever your area of expertise is, be an expert in it, do the work, understand that if it's technology or business or whatever it is, of course, you have to be, technically sound and deliver. I think, like Tyron said, that's kind of table stakes. Do that, but be a person of your word, be trustworthy, be one that mentors others, be generous with your knowledge and your time and your talents. To me, those are the traits that are to me non-negotiables that make you worthy of sponsorship. And those, along with your delivery, will attract the appropriate sponsorship to you, because that's the only way you end up in a C-suite seat.
Yeah, go ahead. I think you were going to say something.
Okay, yeah, I'll let you bring the rear, because I know you're gonna close us out strong. But a couple of things. So enjoy the journey there and create moments throughout that journey. Typically throughout that journey, you have a little bit more space to be creative and to take risk. There's some opportunities you have now that you may not have when you get to the C-suite. So one acronym, and this is an acronym that I created, I always think about, but it's COFO. COFO is an acronym for Create Opportunities for Others. So throughout your career, you want to try to figure out how you could be that asset. So we talked about relationships. When you curate people, you see people, you index them, you meet Tyrone, you meet Gina, two different settings, you see links between them, and then you just connect them through email, and that's it. You go about your business. You find a resource, and you think back to that conversation you had with Nicole, and you send her that resource. And then you create larger opportunities. You start to think about how to create different events, how to create moments within where you work now. You think about Black History Month. What does it mean to bring a bunch of people together around a certain author. And so you've created a moment for that author, you've created opportunity for that author, you've also created opportunity for the diverse people on your staff. So when you're doing things like that throughout your career, you're going to naturally evolve into that leadership level. So just always think about the moments you create, the risks that you can take, the creativity that you can have at this point, and think about, you know, COFO, create opportunities for others.
Yeah, I won't be long here, but I mean that's a really good question. And you know, I've never aspired to be at a C-suite level. So I don't know what to start out with, you know, setting that goal for yourself so early in your career. So I would say be careful what you ask for, because there are a lot of trade-offs that comes with this level in this position, especially in IT and cybersecurity and things like that. But what I would say is focus on where you are now, and make sure you're successful at that level, and people will naturally just gravitate to you and pull you into the next level if you're demonstrating those key leadership. But also say that you know, we have examples of people that have and I'll use Michael Jordan as an example. Michael Jordan was kicked off his high school team because of the games they lost, the missed shot attempts, but he stayed consistent. He kept determination, and he kept practicing, and he kept moving to where he wanted to be to improve himself, to actually accomplish his goal. Now he's known as one of the best, or if not the best, NBA player in the history of the game. You think about Henry Ford, and you think about some of the other people that had innovative ideas, but I think Henry Ford would file bankruptcy 5 or 6 times, but now he's looked at as being the best engineer in the car industry in our lifetime. So as you start to think about this, the message I'm saying is that you may not get there when you want to get there, but don't lose the consistency and the fire and the motivation to accomplish your goals. And the only other thing I would say is, you know, sometimes we get at companies and we stay at these companies, you know, 20 or 30 years, hoping that next year I'll get it. Next year they'll promote me and things of that nature. But I think we have to understand we're under new norms, right? Spending 30 years at a company may not necessarily get you there. So when there are other companies looking to recruit you, and because they want you in those roles, I think you have to start to look at these dynamics a lot differently and say, where am I going to be most successful? Where am I going to accomplish my goals? And where will I need to go to get the sponsorship that I need to continuously navigate up the ladder? And, you know, I'll say this last word and I'll be done with it. A lot of us don't want to relocate. You know, I've relocated to a lot of different places to actually further my leadership skills, further my promotability, increase my brevity of experiences across different areas and different industries. And sometimes we got to open our eyes up to that and say, what do I really want to do? What are my goals and objectives? And sometimes we have to reflect differently on our decision making.
Awesome. Awesome. You all have given us so much to take away. So it is a good thing that this is recorded so that people can play it back and be able to continue to glean from these words of wisdom that you have shared. Well, again, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. So on behalf of BDPA, I would like to thank all of you, Ivory, Cato, Tyrone, Nicole, for not only imparting such words of wisdom to us, but investing your time with us here today so that we could be able to glean from your experiences. So thank you so much. We truly appreciate you and the time that you've expended with us here today.